This is Slow Ride by Foghat, and before we get started, let's tune up. The tuning to this isn't exactly in standard pitch, so I'd like you to tune to my guitar, and that'll be in perfect tune with the recording, so that when you play it along with the recording, it'll sound just like it. Let's start with the 6th string, the low E. Next we have the 5th string, the A string. After that we have the 4th string, the D string. Next we're going to have the 3rd string, the G string. Next the 2nd string, the B string. And finally the 1st string, the E string. Okay, now that we're in tune, let's get started. Okay, before we get started with the song, I'd like to show you some of the tools you're going to need to know to play it. Those being a couple chords and also a couple finger techniques. First one being the A chord. To create that, we use our 1st finger across the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings on the 2nd fret, and also pluck the open 5th string along with it. So that should sound something like this. And we're going to use that right in the beginning of the song, where it's like. Should sound familiar. And what I'm doing here, when you see these fingers move up and down, I'm actually muting the strings while I'm in between strums with the A chord, to have some articulation between the chords. So that's going to be our 2nd technique. What you do here is put your fingers across the strings, but don't press down, and that way when you pick them, you don't get a sound. And also, you see how it can create some space between the chords. Okay, next up is our power chord shape. And the way we achieve that one, it's a movable chord. See how I can move it around the neck? My fingers remain in the same proximity, but as I move it up and down, it changes the sound of the chord. What we're going to do here for this particular song is we have our 1st finger on the 5th string. In this example, we're going to put it on the 3rd fret. Then we're going to bring our 3rd and pinky together and use them like one unit on the 4th string and 3rd strings. That would be 3rd finger being on 4th string and pinky being on the 3rd string on the 5th fret. And then we're going to strum only the strings that our fingers are on. Like this. You can see I'm using a very small pick stroke. Now where we're going to use that is that section of the song. And when we get to that part, I'll explain it a little bit further. Okay, the next chord we're going to need to know is a C chord. And the way we create that one is we use our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string. Then we're going to skip over the 3rd string. That one's going to be open. Then we're going to use our 1st finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string. So the whole thing looks like this together. And I'm strumming through all 5 strings, starting on the 5th string and strumming right through the open 1st string. Our next chord is going to look like this. Should sound familiar if you've heard the song a few times. This is actually a D over F sharp chord with an open A in the bass. So what we're doing here is 1st finger is on 2nd fret of the 3rd string, 2nd finger is on 3rd fret of the 2nd string, and 3rd finger is going to come over here to the 4th fret of the 4th string. And for this one, we're going to strum 4 strings. those being the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 5th. And when we use this in the song, you hear this little change. Okay. The next and last technique that we're going to use is sliding a note. And what I'm doing here is pressing down on my first note, and while maintaining pressure, sliding it down to a different note so that it still sustains. Like so, and then sliding it back up. And that's called a slide. And as you can see, these are just notes from the solo of the song. So that's how we create those notes in the solo. There's all the techniques you're going to need to know. Let's go ahead and start learning the song. Okay, here's the intro to Slow Ride. A couple of times along with the music, it's based on our A chord that we learned earlier, with the muting that we learned earlier, and here's what it's going to look like. The first time around, we're going to go down, up, mute, and then we're going to go down, up, mute, and then we're going to go up, down, up, mute, and then we're going to go, which is open A string, the 5th string, while still maintaining our A chord here, then bringing 2nd finger to 3rd fret on the 5th string, back to the open A string again, and then to 3rd fret on 5th string again. So that looks like this. So what we have so far is this. Then we're going to do this thing again. So we do this 3 times more after 1, 2, 3. And this note here is the 3rd fret of the 6th string. And we're going to give that a little bit of a bend and maybe some vibrato. So that whole lick looks like this. And then from there it starts to the chorus riff. So there's our intro. I'll play it one more time for you, and then we'll go ahead and learn the chorus riff. Alright, let's move along. This is the basically we start on our A chord, and we just do that twice. Then we're going to move up to our bar chord here on the 5th fret, our power chord, pluck only half of it, the low A string, the 5th string, and we're going to go like this. So we're going to split it in half, and we're going to do that once. Then we're going to move it down to the 3rd fret and play the full chord, and back to A. So our whole thing looks like this. So there it is through a few times. It's fairly easy. The hardest part is probably moving from here to here quickly and getting that chord that's kind of been cut in half, and this move is pretty easy. So be aware of the big jump here, and you should be fine. Let's move along to the verse. Okay, you've probably noticed there's some slide guitar in the song. I'm going to show you the major parts of the slide guitar, that being the verse slide guitar and the solo, the parts that really stick out in the song. There's a lot of textural slide guitar that's really hard to hear, that is mostly improvised, that we're not going to cover, just because there's so much of it and it's so random. And I think he plays it a little differently every time. So, but we are going to cover the major parts of the slide guitar, starting with this. This one's pretty easy. It takes place on the second and third strings, and you start kind of somewhere below the 7th fret. What we're going to do is aim for the 7th fret as our target. Actually, these pitches here, right about there. That's just over the 7th fret. And when you play slide guitar, you want to pay attention to the pitches, not so much to where you are over the frets. That's why I'm saying it's going to be somewhere around the 7th fret. And if you give it a little bit of vibrato, it'll help you sound a little bit like you're better in key. So we're going to go from there to 5th and then to 2nd. So we have... And there's our verse riff. And by the way, I'm not using a regular glass slide, you may have noticed. I'm using this little movable, rotatable slide. It's like a ring that fits around your finger with a little piece of metal here. It's a little trickier to use than a regular slide, but I find it to be really convenient because you can switch over to playing regular notes, and then when you need to slide a note, you just kind of pop it around and use it to slide around the strings. They're kind of hard to come by, but if you look online, you might be able to find one. They're made by a company called Digital Revolution, the same guys that make those Bird of Paradise capos that I use in my lessons. So they've got a lot of real innovative products. You might want to check them out, Digital Revolution. Let's go ahead now and learn the next part of the slide guitar, which is going to be the slide guitar in the solo. Okay, here's the bridge to Slow Ride, and I'm going to go over it with the music once, and then we'll take it apart chord for chord, and also the lick at the end of it, note for note. This one's pretty simple. It all starts on our A chord again. We're going to hit that twice, to our D over F sharp, back to A, back to D sharp over F, and then our standard strum that we've been doing 4 times. So, so far it looks like this. Then we're going to do that again. Except this time we're going to end it with this little lick. Slowly, that's 3rd finger on 7th fret, 4th string, to 1st finger, 4th string, 5th fret. Then we're going to bounce over here to the 5th string with our 3rd finger, 7th fret, and then 5th fret again on the 5th string, this time with our index finger. And we're going to hit that twice. So far what we have is this. Then we're going to use our 3rd finger to slide up to the 10th fret on the 5th string, and then 1st finger over to 8th fret over on 6th string, and then slide that down to 5th. So the whole thing looks like this. And there's also some slide guitar over that part too, that makes it sound a little cooler. But that's basically the riff if you want to play it with your fingers. Now when we do the whole song play along, it's really hard to just pick up a slide and start playing if you've been doing the rhythm guitar part with your fingers. So what I'm going to do is use my fingers for the whole song play along part when we kind of jam together over the whole song. This is the solo to... Okay, so there it is with the music a couple times. Let's dissect it now. The whole thing starts on the 5th fret using your index finger, and we're going to slide down to the 3rd fret and slide back up just like this. Then we're going to jump over to the 2nd string and do the same thing. So what we have so far is this. Next we're going to jump to 3rd string, but this time we're going to start on the 6th fret, slide to 4th, and back up like so. So far what we have is this. Now for the little part that goes. We're going to start on the 5th fret, 2nd string with our 1st finger, and play that note. Then we're going to use our 2nd finger on the 6th fret of the 3rd string. Then 3rd finger, 7th fret of 4th string. So we're using 1, 2, 3. Just like that. So what we have, the whole thing looks like this. And you're going to do that twice. The next part of the solo sounds like this. You're going to start with your 2nd finger on the 7th fret of the 4th string, then 1st finger, 6th fret, 3rd string, and then we're going to walk it right up. 2, 3, 4, all on the 3rd string. So that whole section looks like this. And after we do that, we're going to go to the 5th fret on the 1st string, 1st finger, hit that just once, then to 7th fret on 3rd string with our 3rd finger with a little bend, like this. Then we're going to pull that off to the 6th fret on the 3rd string where our 2nd finger should be waiting, and then finally wrap it up with the 3rd finger on the 7th fret of the 4th string. So that whole segment looks like this. Then we're going to do this again, and then we're going to wrap it up with this little lick here, which looks like this. We start with our 3rd finger on the 2nd string, 10th fret, bump it over to 1st string, and do a little bend, pull to 8th, then back to 10th here, and then roll it back to 2nd string, 10th fret. So that whole thing. So when we put the whole thing together slowly, it's going to look like this. Okay, so there's the solo played with our fingers. Let's elaborate on that for those of you that are a little more ambitious and go ahead and play it on slide guitar. This is the slide guitar. Okay, so there it is a couple times slow. If you haven't watched the part of the video where I show you how to play it with just your fingers and not the slide, you might want to go back and catch that now. The notes are the same except with the slide you need to actually find the right pitch on the string as opposed to pressing down on the frets. On this particular guitar I have the action really high, and it's got scaled frets too, which kind of keeps the strings away from the frets a little more. So, and pretty thick strings too. So I've really set it up for slide guitar. So you might want to do that if you're learning the solo, set up a guitar for slide. Okay, so here's where it all begins. We're going to start on this pitch, which should be somewhere near the 5th fret, probably a little farther above it, and then we're going to slide down and then back up. And when you slide, you can always put a little vibrato in it, so you can kind of scoot around the pitch as opposed to just sitting on it, which sounds kind of lame. So we have this. Same notes that we saw earlier, just slid with a slide, not with our fingers. After that, we move to the 2nd string and do the same thing. Then we move over here, which would be somewhere around the 6th fret, maybe a little bit higher than it, and we do the same thing. We're going to slide about 2 frets down and back up. Like so. And then we're going to get the 5th fret here, 6th, and then 7th. Now this sounds kind of lame, note by note. It doesn't sound as exciting as it does quickly. From there, it's going to be a little bit different than we saw before. As opposed to using 1, 2, 3, 4, all of these fingers in a row, we're going to start somewhere near the 7th fret, around here, and then scoot up gradually to this note here. So it's going to look like this. That's it really slow. And notice how I pick only when I know I'm on the right pitch. And then if we do it a little faster, sounds much cooler. And then here, from there, we're going to move to the 10th fret. That's the note we played here earlier. Except here we're on the 10th or somewhere around it. And then from 9th fret down to 4th. And then scoot up to the 7th fret on the 4th string. So we have something like this. And once again, this doesn't sound so spectacular played slowly, but I assure you when you speed it up, it sounds really cool. So far we have this. And we're going to wrap it up with another one of these. And then here we're going to go somewhere near the 10th fret on the 2nd string. Then the 1st string, slide down to 8th, up to 12th, back to 8th, and then wrap it up on 10th. So what we have here is this. And that played quickly will sound like this. So when we put the whole thing together, it's going to look like this. And played along with the music, it sounds a lot better when you have a band in the background. It gives it a lot fuller sound than you get just playing the notes alone. So you probably want to play this one along with a band too. There's the slide solo. Let's move along to the next part of the song. This is the verse to Slow Ride. It all starts on the A chord that we learned earlier. And what we're going to do there is go just one up down stroke. And then we're going to go one stroke on the 5th string, down stroke, and then an upstroke on the third and fourth string. So it's going to look like this. And we're going to do that twice. So the whole thing put together looks like this. Our next chord is going to look like this. It's an F sharp minor of sorts. And what we're going to do here is put our first finger on the second fret of the third string, and then we're going to bring our third and fourth over to the fifth string and the fourth string. Third being on the fifth string and pinky being on the fourth string. And we're going to do the same strum that we just did. We're going to go down, up, then split it up. That's. So for the verse, we're going to alternate these. And that's going to happen 4 times. From there, we're going to go to C, that we learned earlier, to the D over F sharp, and then back to, then C again, D over F sharp, and then back into our chorus. So there's our verse to the song. It's pretty straightforward. Let's move along to the next part.